Hi everyone, welcome to episode 7 of Zero to Hero. My name is Janita Mashenko from Expand Coaching and Consulting. Today we're going to shake things up, look into our crystal ball and be hopeful about 2021. 2020 has seen the global pinch on the world economy and the job market. So what I wanted to do today is invite a very special guest, a talent sourcer extraordinaire, a king in his own right, to come and talk to us about the do's and don'ts of job applications. Why? Because we want to go into 2021 without putting our career goals on hold or thinking about holding patterns. The vaccine is coming in, the market will open up, and Mitch King, our next guest, is going to share some do's and don'ts and how to thrive in this world. So welcome to episode 7, Mitch King. Welcome, Mitch, to Zero to Hero episode 7.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. I just thought that we're all in planning phase for 2021 because 2020 has been something different.
Sure. Yeah, it's I can't remember having a pandemic before in my lifetime, so
it's mainly a first for most of us. And you have been in a recruitment seat, recruiting, particularly in the tech and digital environment.
that's right, yeah.
So the reason I reached out to you is you're very humble, and we have very humble people on this show, as we're about everyday heroes.
Right.
And I feel like you're teaching us a lot through your LinkedIn commentary about the world of job applications as someone who gets 101 through your desk. And we'll go into that in a bit. But if you could just tell us, how did you get into recruiting? What turns you on about being in that talent sourcing seat?
I think every once in a while I've listened to a couple of recruitment podcasts about how recruiters got into recruitment. I don't know if I've ever heard, or maybe one or two people that planned on it. It's a job that people just seem to fall into. So I was relatively young. I started recruitment. I was about 23, 24. I'd done some studying in advertising and marketing. And while looking for an advertising marketing role, I saw an ad for recruitment in that sector. That's how I got into it. And then as that sort of industry progressed, the creative markets became more and more digital. And I'd always just had an interest in that side. And fast forward to, start of this year, basically when COVID hit, and then I started at Linktree, recruiting for them in that tech space, which was what I'd really sort of set out to find next. I didn't think I'd find it that quickly, but it's been great. Obviously it's been a different year. There's a lot of sort of learnings from recruiting during a global pandemic. But
absolutely. Well, what are some of those? Like, what are the big teachings that the market has come up with?
I think for a lot of people, it's changed their priorities. I've seen a shift, I'd say, for the last few years in what people have been. As a recruiter, they come to you with a list of demands, I think, and what they're looking for next, depending on how sought after they are. And we're definitely seeing more and more of that shift to flexibility over salary and learning over title and that sort of thing. I think for job seekers, there's been a couple of different things here. So for some people, it might be the first time they've really experienced a bad job market, and it's really accentuated some of the common frustrations in processes. And I was job hunting at the start of the year myself, so somewhat fortunate, I think, that I still remember what it was like to send off an application and hear nothing back for months, or interview and it just go nowhere. So that has changed things for people, but also the companies that people are looking at. I've started to hear things like the questions around the business stability. Are we recession proof, which isn't I've really heard before. And we're being
and there's no such thing audited. Really, is there? Like, anyone can be subject to a recession if they're not planning ahead, if their strat plans not bolted in with the season.
we'll often find, and I think maybe earlier on at Linktree when I was recruiting, when we were a smaller startup that hadn't gone through Series A, people were sometimes hesitant to be like, well, how stable, how financially secure is this startup? But then 2 days later, a big consultancy lets 700 people go in a day. They probably would have assumed that that was a safer, more secure environment, but bigger doesn't necessarily translate to secure. And
Mm.
I'm sure there's
Now,
a few people that could tell you the same story.
you've actually mentioned Linktree and Bolster a few times. A lot of our viewers are coaches.
Right.
One of the things they're asking is, how do we maintain our persona through all of the different social media platforms? So do you want to just give a plug for who you work for, what they do, and why it's such a booming industry right now?
Sure. So people often confuse that I recruit for two companies. So Bolster is a digital agency out of Collingwood, and that's actually what Linktree was born out of. So the
Mhm.
founders, Alex, had a frustration with constantly having to update platforms for campaigns and artists they were promoting and managing. He one day apparently came to the office and was like, I've had this idea. It's one link, but it's lots of links. They built a prototype and it just grew from there, really sort of snowballed. So the Linktree product is a SaaS platform so that people can connect their digital and social profiles very, very easily. Really any digital user level can use it. Don't have to be a developer, anything like that.
Mm.
And it's gone crazy, essentially, is how I could explain it. It started in 2016. I know that just over a year ago, we probably had about 2.5 million customer accounts. We went past 9 million in November, and we average about over 20,000 new signups per day.
Congratulations. And
Thanks.
that's
Nothing to do with
for
me, but
well, congratulations to Linktree. But I know, and I wanted to mention it because it comes up in a lot of our dialogue as coaches or anybody who's in the entrepreneurial world is, how do we link all of our profiles together? So I've
yeah.
created my own. I
All
finally
right.
figured out how to
Good
do
job.
it, not too
Yeah.
hard. Now, while we're on the subject of boom industries versus crashing industries, you're obviously in a boom industries, but what can you tell us for our job seekers what to align themselves to next year, and maybe some of the industries that are sort of dying off for the moment?
Um, to be honest, I think a lot of where the booms might be coming is a lot of crystal ball. It's guesswork. There'll be a lot of opinions out there. Obvious things like retail, travel, aviation have been hit really hard. But when stock markets crash, they usually bounce back. So there's nothing to say that airlines, aviation, for example, won't go through a boom because they've found a different market or a different way to position or sell themselves.
Can you give us an example?
Well, I wouldn't want to position myself as a futurist, that will see these markets. If they were, I'd be buying all the stocks in the places that I knew. But it might be, look at sort of what happened locally with Virgin and Bain taking over them, how they might cut costs, operate more profitably,
Mm-hmm.
whether there's more or less jobs, I'm not sure.
Mm.
I think for people who are looking to maybe change the sectors that they're in, if they've been hit in a sector, it might not be a case of saying, this is the one, this is the magic industry that's going to survive everything and you can never touch it, because there's probably some old news articles about retail bricks and mortar being that invincible, and look what happened this year. I'd look at more, the advice I'd be giving people is more how they're going about trying to transition from one sector to another.
Mm.
If you're from, let's say, stick to aviation and you're wanting to get into tech, sending CVs to tech companies as they advertise jobs, probably find that's a pretty long, slow, arduous approach. It won't often get far because you're competing against other people from, you know, competing tech companies that have that experience already.
And there's up to
So
600 or more applicants per job, right, at the moment?
yeah, and I'd say that really varies. I know some of the talent communities I'm in. If you were in Bunnings and you were doing, you know, the um, order packing stuff during COVID, I reckon, and I think I maybe saw numbers that were probably more in the thousands for those sorts of roles. Tech, you know, Linktree, we were sort of, it wasn't a free for all, you know, put a job up and you get every best candidate because they're all looking. The tech market is still quite competitive. So working in tech, knowing that we've been hiring and seeing a lot of other industries do the same, I would say that, you know, tech's a good spot to start, but I can't necessarily go out and say to everyone, just get into tech. It's not that easy or simple.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So you do get, I mean, they say you get about 10 to 20 seconds to impress someone or the middle person like yourself. So you've
Yeah.
seen hundreds of resumes come in. Can you start talking us through some of your pet peeves, some of the things we can, as mere mortals, avoid?
Avoid. Yeah. So I guess I see a lot of the, it's not this sort of advice, you know, what to avoid. It's a lot of, you must do this. You must have this one thing in your CV. You must have a cover letter that states X, Y, and Z. That to me is probably one of the main problems, I think, for job seekers at the moment, is there's too many so-called experts peddling this one all be all magic solution. There isn't. There isn't one type of CV that appeals to everyone. My opinion is really my opinion. There's yes, there are some, you know, maybe basics that you could take from that and apply some common sense. But I'd want to be careful and not following down the path of these people who I'm quite critical of. I think they're often the people that I'm mocking on LinkedIn as to being, yeah, self-proclaimed experts when really I think they're just trying to make a buck, like a lot of other people. There
I
are
think you
some
also
tips that
have
I,
a limited time to impress. So one of your tips is just don't clutter your cover letter with the obvious, like, you know,
yeah,
my resume is
there's
attached, it's obvious.
like when I've had people have reached out and asked for advice and I've run through and just, okay, give me your cover letter, give me your CV. And as simple an exercise as just reading their cover letter back to them and saying, well, why are you telling me this when it's the very first sentence on your CV? Like, why are you doing this? And a lot of the responses are, I thought that's how you had to do it.
Mm.
There, I don't know where this rule book is. I haven't seen it, but I've seen a lot of people playing by the same rules when they're putting their CVs together. I think the trap that people fall into is that they put a CV resume together based on a lot of noise and how they've been told it should be done,
Mm.
rather than just really just thinking about it and writing it for somebody else rather than for themselves,
Mm.
and reading it back to themselves or having a friend read it back to them. I always advise people, if you've got a friend that doesn't work in the same sector as you, that's probably the best person to try your CV out on, because if they can't read your CV back to you and explain what you do, then your CV is not good.
And so how much time then do you focus on the cover letter versus the CV?
I'll focus no time at all if the cover letter is generic. If it's addressed to
Right.
hiring manager and it's not specifically about Linktree or Bolster, then to be honest, I don't
So
care.
what would a good opening line be?
A good opening line would
According
be
to the commandments of the king.
the commandments. I mean, as an example, again, anyone listening, there is not one magic line that appeals to all. But the reason why you are interested, suitable in that job, that company. And that's if your CV or your experience comes from maybe slightly left of center to what that company or what that job is, addressing the number one shortfall and how you're filling that gap. So for example, if I wanted to recruit in, I'm just going to keep with aviation because it's there. I wanted to change and be a recruitment in aviation. I don't have anything aviation on my CV to point at. So the first thing that the person looking at my CV is going to look at is no aviation experience, pass. So in my cover letter, my opening line would be to try to address that first hurdle.
Okay.
You won't see aviation experience on my CV, but I can explain X, Y, and Z to you. I'm a commercial pilot that's not on my CV. Whatever it might be, whatever the justification is that you think you have that makes you suitable.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, if you don't have an answer to the biggest shortfall, then you're probably not right for the role.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to self-assess a bit there.
So we talked about people wasting their real estate on their cover letters. We've talked about a really good sort of entry line. Are there, for the candidates that do stand out, what are they doing? If we could get into their mindset and your mindset, what are some things that the audience can learn from going into a new and more hopeful year for jobs and employment?
The good candidates, in terms of finding a common trait, they do a very good job of, I mean, it depends on what stage you're talking about. In the CV, it's giving specific information quickly. And it's definitely more common than not for people to write very generic, broad things. So for an example, I guess we stick with aviation, right? I'm a pilot, so I just write pilot, Qantas, 2019, 2020. That's it. A good candidate will write, international pilot, Qantas, main routes, Sydney, LA, 737, A380, tick, tick, tick. The things that people are really sort of looking for. Account managers that don't put their clients in their CV. Developers that don't mention the type of builds or tech stack, just I'm a developer. So from the application standpoint, they leave as little guesswork as possible. They've got someone who's, you said, that 10 to 20 seconds, very quickly fill the gaps there for them.
And so how do you reconcile that with put yourself in the employer's shoes, but stay authentic to who you are?
Staying authentic, it's a good one. I mean, in the employer's shoes, I think sometimes people just need to start by doing that. I think, again, that common pitfall is they put the blinkers on and they put stuff at their CV, but they're only internalizing, they're only looking at what's on the paper and what's in their mind. They don't take a step back and think, I've worked in this space for a long time. If my team was hiring, what would we be looking for? It's important to have that, they need to have used that particular piece of software. They need to have used that or work experience in that size of a platform or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I think, taking a step back and again, maybe bringing in a third party to look at the
That's
CV.
a really good point. You've always got someone in your household or in your friendship groups that can, give you that extra time to have a look at it. And I think also when you're doing your research, you can always go onto the employer's website and have a look at that tone of voice that they've got.
Yeah. I see this myself, like if I'm applying for a job that I really want, yes, my cover letter, it would be custom. I would do other things rather than just hit apply. But I think people who've not had success in job hunting and they've sent off 100, 200 applicants, they will then be reluctant and dismissive of customizing applications because their previous applications aren't getting anywhere. But I mean, I don't know where to start there because all you're doing is just repeating the same mistakes
Yeah.
frustrating yourself, making it
Yeah.
worse, getting
Especially
angry.
if you're going for professional roles, it's probably less a numbers game and more a quality game. So you,
Yeah, it's so many different circumstances. This is again one of my gripes with the experts or the articles out there about this is how to get the job you want. Like that sort of stuff. I try not to enter into, clickbait or online arguments with people, but those sorts of things really trigger me, and I want to sort of comment on there because there's so many different scenarios. Like, who is looking at your CV first? There's a lot of commentary out there on applicant tracking systems and how much they do of the screening process, and starting to see, articles and forums about how to, or services pay us and we'll write a ATS compliant CV for you. Now, my experience, my ATS doesn't filter out candidates for me. It just puts them in an orderly spot for me to look at. Are there other companies using their ATSs to filter people out? Probably.
yeah.
But
Also, I mean, I guess in a market like this that is so voluminous, recruiters are going to rely on that match a little bit more, right? On the word match to just siphon people out. So there's no harm in going into a free ATS match platform and just seeing what kind of word match you have to the job. There's no harm in that. I mean, there's a lot of free tools out there that can assist you, but nothing, it seems like from what you're saying, nothing beats having a very custom approach to the job you want. And of course, there's going to be cultural differences wherever you go. America's a bit more, I guess, really, really results driven in terms of they want to see those numbers up front. Australia, probably you could get away with a little bit more personality in your application.
I would be hesitant to, even industry wise, I wouldn't generalize to that level, because no matter who it is, you just can't please everyone. So if it's the finance sector, for example, and you go, everyone in finance likes CVs this way, then a fintech breaks out and they go, you know what we're looking for? Someone with a finance background who's just not really financy. And that could be you, but what is out there from your CV and your network is just another A4 PDF with the same things.
Right.
So this is what, we've spoken about prior, and a lot of what I try to, I guess, get across is, if you be yourself, and job hunting shouldn't just be reactive. It shouldn't be, there's a job online and I apply for it. These days, and I always tell people this, that's how I got my job at Linktree and Bolster. It's through networks more and more. Who you know, I mean, you and I, we're in some of the same Slack groups. You know that if someone's got someone in their network that they recommend and is available, I mean, think of the person on the other side of that, as if a talent acquisition manager would rather not have a referral from someone they know and trust rather than 1,000 CVs.
Yeah. So it's personal branding. It's not just, we've been talking about the passive market, but comment on your LinkedIn, get involved, comment on other people's posts, and just increase your networks that way when you are nice and comfortable in a job, because that's going to pay back for you, in those down times. Now, I know that you would be the last person to say this, but your LinkedIn posts crack me up. Two things. I laugh, and I'm not the only one, because you have quite a followership. So people check out his LinkedIn. I'll put a URL in there that you should have a look at.
Plug.
But the power of storytelling and the power of metaphors is where I think that you really shine from other recruiters. And at the same time, you're educating us as well. So can you talk to us about, if we're looking at our marketing plan and our branding, how we can use some of that mindset technique to create a brand for ourselves?
Sure. Well, thank you. Firstly, I get friends, people I've worked with for a long time tell me this. I'm really bad at taking compliments. It might be a topic for another time, but it actually sort of stems back to imposter syndrome. I don't actually believe that I'm any good. I'm getting better at, people keep telling me, so something must be, going right at some point. But where the advice that I give people in doing, and let's just say LinkedIn, for example, it can be any platform or in the real world. It doesn't have to be, if you look at somebody else and you try to copy what they do, you're just starting down the really bad path of not being yourself. The only thing that I really sort of as an overall blanket policy to people say is, if you don't listen to the voices in, your own head or the criticism, and just keep pushing with the sort of content about what you believe in. So no matter what industry you are, you should have some form of opinion. And you might want to be more passive and just regularly comment on other thought leaders. You might want to attend a lot of webinars and, sit there and really take it in, but do something afterwards. Follow up and say, hey, I really liked that point you made. Do you mind if I ask you about this? And just sort of get into that way. So I don't recommend people go out and try to write funny content just for the sake of writing funny content. Please, no one try to write motivational content, because I haven't seen a person yet who writes motivational content and actually motivates, well, me, but the majority of people that I speak to, it turns them off a platform like LinkedIn. And that sort of stuff is probably what actually drove me to start writing in the first place.
Yeah.
Just this constant flow of, how successful I am. And if you want to be as successful as me, these are the things you must do. And, there'd be some examples where I saw those people and then maybe I interviewed them, or maybe they were a client. And I'm like, you know what? You're actually not very successful at all, but say things confidently enough, and loud
Certainty.
enough. Yeah. And people will buy into that. That I think you asked me sort of some of the LinkedIn posts and where that sort of comes across, how I come up with these ideas. And I don't have a particular formula. I don't have one way. The one, to make myself sort of more relatable to people, the one time I feel like I come up with ideas that might even out the bragging to humbleness is I'm a slow walker. So I know slow walkers aren't very popular, but when everyone else is rushing around trying to get to places really quickly, I'm just sort of in my own thoughts and looking at a thing and going, oh, you know what that reminds me of? That thing about recruitment. So I don't know how to tell the people, this is how you come up with ideas. And every once in a while, someone will drop in my inbox and ask.
That's a form of mindfulness. Advertisers use that a lot, association. What does this phone cover have to do with recruitment? What does my experience with that barista have to do with recruitment? And it becomes quite creative, and it sends a really good message to the reader about how to do things the right way or the wrong way. So I think it's been very entertaining. You've certainly got a lot of people's attention, and I think you wouldn't have time to respond back to all of your commentators, but you do actually I guess elicit some discussion, some mindful discussion. So you've got 2 kids and a family, so any tips on how to maintain balance when you're in a very high octane job?
Probably going back a step, the reason I left my last job was I was stressed and traveling. So I was at a company for 12 years and just being promoted to sort of, a managing director level, and just wasn't happy. So I actively, and this might sort of flow into if you have people coaching or listening that are trying to change careers. I actively pursued on what on paper would be a step back in title and in salary. Now that they were my drivers. That's what now makes me happy. So COVID, obviously we're all forced to work from home. Linktree is really good in terms of flexibility. We've got remote workers. We're spread across Australia. a couple of 4-day-a-week people, hiring internationally. So,
and I think Alex Zachariah is very plugged into wellness.
Yeah, Alex, all the founders really plugged into it. They're also just really smart about how they approach, I think everything really. So if you go to them and I say, hey guys, I like working for Linktree, but I'd be a lot happier if I just worked from home more and didn't have to travel and got to see my kids more. And they would go, that makes sense. We can see how that works. That's fine. We'll ask for a little bit of flexibility every now and again for the business, but there is no, well, we've always done it this way. And if you ask for it, then these people are going to ask for it. It's the stuff they've brought in, act proactively in mindfulness, and they gave everyone in the business 2 paid days off during heavy lockdown in Melbourne, just understanding that, it wasn't a lot of fun a lot of the time.
Human-centered design, nothing beats it.
Yeah, and without even sort of getting to that complicated human-centered design, people sort of ask me about this, and I often say I think the founders are like this because they are entrepreneurs. Like they've been running, their experience is primarily running their own businesses, so they haven't been conditioned to think in a certain way. They haven't worked at the big corporates or the big tech companies and been conditioned that lots of meetings is good, or everyone must be in the same office. They almost do the opposite, I think. It's like, well, why can't that work? And try it, and if it doesn't work, okay, it didn't work. But there is very little
legacy impact.
I'll say to people all the time, often if I'm headhunting people for Linktree, I'm trying to find smart, frustrated people.
I like that.
If they've been tethered by layers and layers of management and red tape, and they can just see, this is how we could make this better. If I could only just get X, Y, and Z to approve it, but they're always off, doing other things. That's sort of what I look for when I'm out in market, sort of looking for people. But I guess going back to that point, for me, in looking to make that transition and actively sort of pursuing that, you can't just send CVs off. It's being too senior for a job is almost the same as being too junior a lot of the time. And I know there's a lot of frustration. I'd say the creative industry, ad agencies that I used to recruit for a lot, maybe some of the worst when it comes to ageism. So you have to sort of approach things in different ways because your CV doesn't give you a chance to speak.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's what I'm getting the most. One size is not going to fit all in any market. So they're all sort of age-old tips, but I think it's great to rehash them. And I love the way you're doing it through the platform, through LinkedIn. So congratulations again. Any last words before we go?
Any last words? No, I don't consider myself motivational. That I'm I know that I write the content, but I've done it for different reasons. I feel uncomfortable.
You're a reluctant motivational influencer.
When I left my last job, a previous CEO reached out to me and said, "I know that you're a reluctant leader," which I thought was quite interesting for someone I'd only met 3 or 4 times. But he was right on the money there. I like to sort of sit under the radar a little bit more. So writing in LinkedIn, it gives me a bit of a buffer. I'm uncomfortable if, you put me in front of a stage of people and everyone's looking at me. I did that once last year and I was sweating a lot. I didn't sleep much the night before.
So. I think the more you practice something, I think there certainly is some options for you to have a national and international speaking career should you choose to go there. As you know, myself and a lot of your followers can't wait to see your LinkedIn posts become memoirs. I'm pretty sure it will be an Amazon bestseller. And we saw you first here. Thank you so much for your time.
Not a problem. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, and we look forward to applying some of your tips to our 2021 job search goals.
No problem. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. And don't know if anyone sees me on LinkedIn, feel free to message me. I might not get back straight away, but I do try to help if I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Bye.